welcome. Lovely to have you. We thought we needed a bit of brightness today because really it is pretty grey and we're all in lockdown, and we just, I think, need a little bit of stimulation and some images and some interesting thoughts to cheer everybody up. So this is something a little bit different from what we've been doing before, because usually it's been me and an architect, and actually we thought we really just wanted to talk to two professionals who we really admire and to talk about their work, and we thought that's what we would do. So we're going to be talking to photographer Taran Wilkhu and senior editor Nick Compton, and we just thought that we do maybe a little bit more than just talking about getting published. That's one of the parts of this kind of conversation, but we thought we'd also do a little bit of kind of contextualization, and maybe they're going to share their thoughts about their work process and also their inspiration. So I'm hoping that we'll all have the opportunity just to listen to what their desire is to make work, and also to make work that makes people think and smile, because I think we need that right now. And I was thinking about how important design is. I don't know, on your mood, I thought today I would wear a necklace and designed piece of jewelry that makes me feel better, because I think actually good design helps. And actually before this conversation, before everybody came in, we were talking about what makes us feel better. There was a bit of talk about climbing and yoga from Nick and Taran. So I think we're going to think about things that actually make us feel better as well. So that's a good thing. So the format, I don't know if you've been to these talks before, but the format is the same as usual. And it's that we'll have Taran will talk first, and then Nick is going to talk for about 20 minutes each, and then we're going to have time for questions. So Taran, I'm going to say hi to Nick. Hi, Nick. Thank you for being here. And no Taran, thank you for coming and being prepared to share some images and some thoughts this Friday. We need it. You're going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to hand over the reins to Nick. So I'm going to let you both kind of introduce yourself, which I think you will do much better than I will. So I'm going to let you do that. So we were discussing that you have this wonderful DD connection. So our Design District talks, obviously. And Taran, you've been wandering past DD and sort of examining behind the colourful hoardings for a while. And so I was wondering kind of what made you think, oh yeah, there really is something interesting going on here.
Hi Jemima, and yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say huge thanks to the Design District team for bringing me on board this sort of journey. I'm really optimistic and excited to be able to document what I believe will be sort of an iconic epicenter for London creatives. So it's super exciting to be on board. I mean, I first initially, I guess, found out about the Greenwich Design District site through my wife, Celine, who works at the Greenwich Maritime Museum. And we'd often go on sort of family bike rides along the river. And she said, you know, there's something really interesting going on behind there. So, you know, it was her initially who spoke to me about it, but then it was Julia.
I'm going to interrupt you there because I know how many images you've got to get through.
Yeah.
I'm going to go, I love your logo, but I want to see your beautiful images.
Oh, yeah, we'll get onto that. All right. So basically it was Julia Wetzel who made the introduction to, let me just get onto the next slide. Hang on. Oh, it's not working. Hang on. Oh, there we are. There's the first slide. Yes, there's lots of slides to go through. You're right. So Julia Wetzel, she sort of introduced me to the Design District team as a marketing consultant, and she was working on the social media content strategy side. But this image here on the left, this is a really great image to start things off because it was taken on my iPhone. It's just a family looking down at our feet and these colorful panels. And you can see those colorful panels in context there on the image on the right, which is a really great image to kick things off because it sort of shows the proximity of the site with the river behind and Canary Wharf and the proximity to North Greenwich station as well. So, you know, I guess when you come out of North Greenwich station, this is the first thing you see on your right hand side. So there's always some something interesting going on there at the back, and that's Yulia walking past as well. This is on the top floor of the HNNA building. One of the sites. I sort of look at this image and I kind of think of you know, it's a bit of a shame if architects, you know, don't take mid-construction shots, because, you know, you really get to sort of see the sort of bare bones of structures and materials and things. And yeah, I really love this sort of image and the opportunity to go in at this mid-construction stage.
It's sort of like the skeleton, and I think it does give you something different. It gives you a different view of the place, and not one that everybody's getting. So it's great that we've got these.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many people have seen these. I mean, I'm sure Nick, you may have seen some, because these were, a lot of these were featured in the wallpaper editing as well.
The first article that was about the design district was with Wallpaper. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've been tracking it, you know, for forever and ever. It's just interesting what Taran just said, and often with public build, I don't want to interrupt too much, but with public buildings, public spaces, we love these kind of under construction sites, because under construction kind of images, just to see things in progress, they're great.
Yeah, I love this image here of the Architect 00. I mean, this is going to be, if people don't know about this, it's going to be one of the most iconic sort of basketball courts, open air basketball courts. And you can really see how close it is to the O2 there as well, which I love. And then this next slide here about, oh, these twin sloping structures here. I mean, this image sort of, for me, gives real sort of snippets of dialogue between the buildings as well in the space, and I can't wait to see this being realized, this project. So yeah, super excited about that.
I think, as we discussed, it's the fact that you've got some seriously interesting architects who are all designing in the same space, and it's going to be kind of like a mini view of what 2020 architecture is like. And, you know, they all have their own style, and yet they've all been given a very similar plot, and they've all done very different things with them.
Yes, yeah, no, it's super excited to be on board with this. I mean, I've only been in once, and it was during, you know, a couple of days before lockdown, and I just can't wait to get back on site. Yeah, I can't wait to get back on site.
Сейчас, секундочку, у меня тут происходит Zoom.
That's an interesting addition.
Jemima, you speak in another language there?
I wish. I'm really jealous. I can't speak that at all. Please go on.
So yeah, I think I know you sort of initially was wondering how I actually got into photography in the first place as well. So I wanted to share, you know, my background hasn't always been photography. You know, I've worked in, you know, I actually studied law back in the late 90s, and, you know, I've done various different jobs from, you know, working and living in Japan, teaching English, worked as a film festival director, events industries, travel. And my last job before I actually fell into photography was at Goldman Sachs. Yeah, I was sat in an investment bank, not as a banker, but yeah, I've done a lot of different roles before this. So, you know, having the opportunity to work in the sphere I am now is just such a breath of fresh air for me. I did actually start out, I don't know if you know this, Jemima, but as a wedding photographer. It's really funny. I mean, like, I actually loved going to weddings, and I just thought, oh, this would be a really good way to, you know, like start photography, you know, like, but I soon found that I actually prefer going to weddings as a guest rather than, you know, as a photographer, because the pressure in a wedding photography is just immense, and you really feel sort of exhausted after that as well. But it's quite different style of photography, but you do learn a lot about how to capture people in spaces, the enjoyment of people interacting with spaces. But I really felt, I guess, I liked the still life aspect of it, so when people were not there as well. So that sort of brings me on to my next slide, if I just bring it up here, where I ended up taking a course at London College of Communications on architectural photography, and that was a game changer for me. So here's a few, you know, images of a field trip that we took, the Serpentine Pavilions in 2016. And it was, you know, a really good opportunity to sort of see and learn some principles about architectural photography and see how people interact with different sites, and all in one day as well. So that, yeah, that was a really great experience for me.
It's also the fact that you can frame a building to make it something interesting. I think the thing about buildings is you could just take a photograph and it could be a really boring photograph, and actually you can take a photograph and it can be something kind of astounding. And it's how do you choose your shot? Do you know when you put the camera up, do you know that you've got the one?
That's an interesting question. I mean, do I know if I've got the one? I kind of like to make sure that I look with my eyes. I really look deeply, and that's how, you know, like we all look with our eyes, but you look at the shot and you see how you want to frame that shot before you take it. And composing an image is so important to me. I had the opportunity of doing that once I graduated here, by picking a sort of personal project. And let me just bring up that next slide here, because they're all in sort of an order as well. But this was my first sort of entry into publications as well, and realizing we actually did this. This was with an architectural journalist, Alice Graham, and I. We sort of created a book documenting the streets that we live in and the architectural interiors and the sort of community feel of those. Of the buildings that we live in, and we set about sort of self-publishing 200 copies of this for an open house event, and we sold out within a weekend. And we thought, you know what, we should really take this to the next level. And I found out about the Frankfurt World Book Fair, and I took it across over there, and I showed it to a few different publishers, and we ended up going with Park Books, a Swiss publisher. And so, yeah, this is my next door neighbor's house, by the way. I'm sure he'll love that. I'll show you stuff. But yeah, these are the kind of spaces we live in. So they're real sort of self-built, beautiful homes. And, you know, having that opportunity to do that on your doorstep, you know, framing the shot, getting it right, going back again, meeting the neighbors and everything. I think that was really sort of great experience for me. And getting into the publishing world, you know, like straight away, like within my first project that I ever did, you know, I managed to get a book published and distributed 10,000 copies worldwide. So yeah, I was like, woohoo, we're in there. But it was at this, it was actually at this, the launch of this event where I had the chance meeting of with Matt Gibbard. I don't know if you're aware of who he is.
That's your Modern House connection.
Exactly. So he came along to the launch event of that, and I'll just bring up a couple of slides in that as well. So he I don't know if anyone, where you've been living if you don't know who the Modern House are. I mean, obviously they're an estate agent, but they're a sort of design-led estate agent, and you know, it's bringing that sort of sense of escapism and, you know, aspirational. And what Matt said to me was, you know, look, Taran, we've got to shoot different to Foxtons and everyone else. We're completely different. And, you know, he's come from an editorial background himself, and he said, look, you know, let's shoot this editorially, and I want you to jump on board and see what your take is on this. And it's real, you know, it was a real sort of a great way to build up my portfolio, to see some amazing houses around the country as well. This is actually one of my favorite homes that I had the opportunity to shoot when I was with the Modern House. And this is the Klein House up in the Scottish borders. Wow. And this was, I guess, the first house that I went in where I actually felt goosebumps, if you like, you know, you're walking into this kind of space.
I think that's such an interesting bit. It's like how a house can make you feel that, can give you goosebumps. But the other thing is what is a home? You must have been inside lots of people's homes, and what makes, because it's not just about the fact that it's, I don't know, it's beautiful, it's something else as well that really makes it work as a home. Is it an essence of kind of home that you can, when you go in somewhere, you just know that something feels good?
I mean, for me, I was a big fan of sort of mid-century furniture and that sort of modernist look. But coming into a home like this really made me feel comfortable. I don't know, it's really, it's this feeling of like, I love the light in these kind of homes, and that sort of sense of materiality as well that you get when you're in there. And that, I mean, I live in a similar sort of style house as well. And, you know, home is where the joy happens. And if you feel it when you walk in, you know, it's a special place. I don't know what your Nick, your home.
Nothing like that, unfortunately.
I mean, what a home.
You can see most of it.
That's not my home, by the way. Yeah, I
try to bring the joy though.
So
yeah.
I just want to bring on some other slides because I have quite a few slides here to get through as well. But my second book that we got published was, I think, Nick, you'll know the writers of this book, Sir John and Rosa Bertoli, but this was with Hoxton Mini Press, and it was called An Opinionated Guide to London Architecture. I mean, you know, the process of putting this together was just amazing as well. You know, we selected, like, you know, from 150 potential spaces. You know, we got to choose and dissect it right down to like 50 odd amazing plus must-see sort of places in London. And yeah, we've got a wide range of architecture in here, from classical to modernist to brutalist, I don't know, postmodern, contemporary, you know, the whole shebang. I love this image here of Coldrop's Yard by Heatherwick Studio as well.
But can I just say, Coldrop Yard does look like that, but it also doesn't look like that. You've made it look kind of extraordinary. Yeah, I think it's the difference between me looking at it and you looking at it. That you really kind of, what is it? Is it the curves? Is it the negative space? The fact that you have the clouds? You know, what makes that a great photo?
Nick, I'd like to hear what you think, actually. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think that? What is it about that shot that you think is publishable?
Wow, it's a good. Something's popped up there. It's just an amazing composition, isn't it? And as Jemima said, I actually love Coldrop Yard. I think it's such a successful space. Maybe not commercially, but
I think
as a visitor. But you know, that on a DPS, you're just thinking that's the money shot there. And like I say, it's the way the curves are working and the arches are working and the.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also the the light, the reflection, the scalability of it. You can really see that with just adding one person in there, or even some.
So the one thing we'd get rid of the person. We don't really do people in that art.
Do you know?
Now, Taran, you've got 2 more minutes, so I don't know. Yeah,
oh. Right, I'll just flick through these. So yeah, it's a couple of.
I want to make sure that we have time for Nick as well.
Right. Okay. So I'll just go into a couple of slides quickly. So these are my first 2 front covers. International front cover with milk decoration, and the UK cover with the Times Lux report. These are various titles that I've worked with in the last 2.5 years. So I honestly feel so happy that I'm in this job, and it's really like amazing that I've actually had the opportunity to work and had features with all these different magazines. I just wanted to go through some light and ambience, and we were talking about what makes a great shot. For me, like, light is of absolute paramount importance. It can make or break a shot. It can sort of add drama and obscure details and create flattering lines. I mean, when I shoot images of architecture and interiors, I shoot them with natural daylight. And so one of the first things I do when I go into a space is I turn the lights off, and then I sort of work with the client and say, okay, right, let's watch the daylight, how it's going to come through this building, and then make a plan of how we're going to sort of document the space. But in addition to that, light and ambience, texture is so important for me. And this image in itself, it's the Cloud House by Shimazaki, and you've got that sort of warmth of the wood on the left, and then this clay, it's actual clay sort of plaster render on this concrete surface. And texture and materiality is super important for me as well. There's a few more images there. This one here of Lost House by David Adjaye. I mean, it's a really, really difficult space to shoot because it was so reflective, and it had all these black surfaces, and then these the windows, the big light well. That's a light well. I mean, this is actually Sir David Adjaye's one of his first residential homes, I understand. that he shot, that he created, and it's in King's Cross. And you just, when you're in that space, you just don't feel the outside. It's an amazing space. But this is one shot that I use on my website as well, and it's all about the geometric lines. For me, this is a winner shot. You know, this is me in a nutshell. You know, it's got beautiful lines, it's got great color, it's got that sense of light and ambience to it. Yeah, so you know, geometric lines are really, really important to me. Hang on, I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. Heatherwick Wakefield. Yeah, that's I'm a Yorkshireman, and that's not too far.
I have to say, it is architectural porn. I mean, it's
architectural porn. Thank you. Yeah.
It's looking at kind of buildings that are completely gorgeous, but you have just ramped it up, which
I think
what we need.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you can say that. I mean, like, one of the things I wanted to touch on here was like context and how important that is for my imagery as well. Because even in this shot, you can see the context of the landscape. But, you know, just having that scalability on the left there with the outdoor furnishings really sort of brings the viewer to get excited about, you know, what he's looking at. And then I think what I also like to do is bring people into shots. I know you don't like that, Nick. I'll just
no, I don't mind.
But look, you know, that gets me a lot of lifestyle gigs as well.
Yeah.
And you know, this is a really great shot of a family just enjoying. This is an outbuilding, in fact. It's not even the main house.
But it's also that thing of actually seeing how spaces are used, which I totally get that Nick doesn't want the people in, but it's quite nice to see how that you can talk to your husband from the balcony. That's, you know, that's kind of
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Throw things at him.
I know that my last question to you was about what else are you passionate about, and yeah, I'm hoping that you will get onto that.
Yeah, I think what we wanted to touch on a little bit about was diversity in design. I know we haven't got much time to go through all this, but I think, you know, what I'd like to see, I mean, you know, the whole Black Lives Matter movement and things like that going on, but what I'd like to see personally is more voices in sort of boardroom level, if you like. But what we can do before that is maybe just start reading, you know, reading some non-white literature. And a couple of recommendations for you there. Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Renee Lodge, and The Good Immigrant. I love this book. It's just a series of, you know, really interesting essays about being an immigrant. And one of the things I think is really important to me in diversity in design is giving back something. So I sort of started out a volunteering program with ELBA, the East London Business Alliance, and do some mentoring, which I've really, really enjoyed over the summer. And it's just an opportunity to sort of speak to, you know, kids from different backgrounds and let them know about the different opportunities in design. I know United in Design are doing, you know, great things in the interior side with Alexandra Dawley and Sophie Ashby. And then you've got Reba supporting Black females in architecture. But one of the other,
if we look at the diversity in the design district, it's sort of nil. And sort of talking around that, it's always been the fact that, oh well, there isn't anybody coming up in that world. Well, now I think it's exactly as you said. It's got to be feeding in at the roots. You know, getting people meeting you and then getting inspired. You literally have like 30 seconds because otherwise. And we've had 25 minutes and I want to get back to Nick, so it would be lovely.
So I'll quickly show you some pictures of our house. This is our house. And this is a new extension we've just built in our house.
You said it was quite traumatic, I think.
Well, it was traumatic, but in the sense that, yeah, we were just wondering, will it get finished, you know, in time? And it did just before lockdown. So super happy about that. But yeah, you can have a look at some images of my house here. I guess you wanted to have some takeaways as well, didn't you?
I thought I would think we're going to do those
at the end. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. So yeah, there's me in a nutshell and my house.
Oh, I'm sad you took out the photograph of your family at Diwali.
I haven't. There they are.
There you go.
So that's not the Diwali one, but yeah, it's just the family having a bit of fun during lockdown. So, you know, maybe that'll add a bit of colour. This is when everyone was told to wear masks. And we just made a little family portrait in the same spot. And then this is that Diwali picture as well that you mentioned.
That made me very happy. We all need it. Taran, thank you so much. I think we can come back to, well, we'll definitely come back to you after we've talked to Nick. But I hope that will give everybody some serious inspiration. I kind of still feel that I want you to be holding the camera instead of me, but that's beside the point. Nick.
Hello.
Tell us, because obviously, you know, there's one end of it, which is making the content, and then there is the other, which is actually how does the content become print? And I'd love to hear from you.
Well, okay, I just wanted to say something, by the way, about Taran and architectural photography, and it's just this, how hard it is to do that, and how much work is involved in getting those kind of shots, you know. And I've been done, you know, any number of jobs with photographers and architectural photographers, and you have to get up at the crack of dawn, and you have to, the access, you know, where you shoot from. I mean, looking at that Coles Drop Yard picture, I'm actually like, where did you get that shot from? How did you get access to that position? So if anybody thinks what Taran does is easy, I tell you, it's not. It's super hard work. So anyway, that was just a plug for that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what was the question, Jemima? How does?
I think let's contextualize you. What's great about actually having you here is you've also worked, you've done my job. As when I was off swimming my 15K, you came and taught Barosi Viega, and I suppose what I asked, that as an editor, actually you are about talking to people. That's the kind of key thing, amongst others.
Yeah, and I think, absolutely. I think,
you know, what did you learn from the architects you spoke to, and also kind of, how do you go about commissioning, and what skills do you have to make it happen?
So, I mean, in terms of, you know, I think to be a magazine editor and journalist, you have to love talking to people, and that's always been the thing that always was of interest to me is journalism. You get this weird kind of backstage pass where you can, you know, you have an excuse to talk to people and go and see people and go to different places, and that's the joy of the job, really. So talking to Alberto is, you know, and you do the diligent preparation, and then you hope that they come up with something that's surprising and you learn from and you take away from. And also as an editor, you're always looking to build relationships in a way. So half of the job, or a good part of the job, is, you know, building a relationship with somebody so I can go back to them and say, what are you working on? And trying to, you know, get ahead of whatever official communication channels there are, whether that's PR or whatever. So you're just, being an editor is partly building up this network of, you know, people, where you're going, what you're up to, keeping track of it, and then working with everybody else on the magazine. So you've kind of got this list of things coming up, and you're always planning around that, and you're trying to own those things as well, I suppose, is the key thing. You're trying to get them exclusively and have exclusive access to them, and involve great photographers and all that kind of stuff. So
the actual logistics of it, how often do you get your content from PR people, so them sending in ideas? How often is it, you know, kind of what's the percentage of people, of your writers pitching ideas? Where do you go? Or is it sometimes you just have an idea and you commission it?
It's sometimes it's idea, we try and not, as much as possible, not be PR led. So as much as possible, it's, you know, we have an architecture editor and a design editor and me and, you know, fashion team.
So why are we all paying our PR agencies then?
Well, they help, you know, and they often get involved, and, you know, you don't always, I'm not being anti-PR, because, you know, they're not all baddies getting in the way. It's just that you try, if you want to do something exclusively and generate stories yourself, then you try and work around that. But of course they help out and you know, and ease things through in lots of ways. I would say very rarely do stories come from new writers. They come from established writers once you kind of trust them, but they very rarely come from new writers or young writers, just because we're planning so far ahead, and we're this kind of editorial calendar, and we have themed issues. So in terms of just advice for young writers, that's not to don't pitch your ideas, because it's important to kind of, as an editor, for you to know that a writer is thinking in the right way, even if you don't end up using those ideas. You know, the ideas help you get a sense of, okay, they get it, and then something else might come up and you can go back to them if they can write and their sense of what you're doing is right.
I think that's interesting, Nick, sorry, as well, from my perspective. You're talking from a writer sort of pitching, and I also sometimes submit images to editorials as well. You know, I've got good relations with different publications, and I would say, look, you know, tell me what you're working on, what are your themes at the minute, and maybe something that can fit through imagery, and then they send out an editor or a writer as well. So
what was the first thing you got accepted, Taran? What was the first image that you sent, and where did you send it, and how did that happen? What was your break? Because that's what everybody is kind of, where they want to know.
Well, I mean, I guess it all stemmed from the first book, you know, the Walter's Way book, and having an architectural writer on board in Alice Graham. She worked for the Guardian and the Times as well, so she sort of said, right, okay, we've got the book now, let's get some press on it, and then she was the first one to get it published. And once your name sort of starts coming and popping up as well, it's quite exciting to see. You know, like I had a syndicate agent now who contacted me and said, look, Taran, we'd really love to represent you and, get your work out more globally and things like that. So I work in lots of different ways within that, but it's, I don't know. It's not, I can't think of just any other images that, I mean, there's just so many. I don't know where.
Well, that's good. And back to sort of wallpaper. What makes wallpaper? Because I would say, I'm sure, Taran, you agree with this, but what's so special about wallpaper? What makes it? Yes.
I mean, just to explain, I've been there for kind of almost 17 years now, which is a long time. As features editor, features director, acting editor for a while, senior editor, and now kind of part-time senior editor. So it's changed a lot. But I mean, when I freelanced for it before then, but its strength has always been, any great magazine creates its own universe, right? Or that people want to be part of, people want to be in, and it had such a confident voice, and it was talking about design. And at a time when people didn't talk about it in the way they do now, and didn't consider as central a thing as they do now. But and it had a very clear and confident editorial voice. And it was originally kind of camp and kind of funny and kind of ironic. And over those years, we've kind of moved it and kept moving it along and changed it. So now it's kind of less of a lifestyle magazine than it was, and it's much more of a kind of design and process story driven magazine. And it's always trying to stay kind of central to design culture and kind of lead where design culture is going. So yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's been successful, and it's moved, and it's also, we make a lot of effort to control and create our own stories, whether that's creating exhibitions or inviting guest editors or commissioning artists to do covers. It's kind of owning your own world in a way. I think that's what it's created a world and owned it and moved it and created this kind of universe to itself.
Journalism, I was curious to find out, because obviously, I read the real thing, but I also read it online as well.
Yeah.
And that actually has meant that there are two different platforms in which you can get information across. How much is the same? And also, actually, is it liberating having the digital? Do you sometimes feel, let's just get rid of the real?
Wow. Yeah, it's a massive question about print, digital, and how the two mix, and all magazines are trying to work out how that works now. I mean, I've always been somebody who'd argued that print content should stay print content and shouldn't go online, but I'm kind of losing that argument. and part of the, I mean, why you commission something like Taran is so that you own the story, that you own those, not you don't own, not in a legal sense, but they're your images, that's your story. You commission that person, you commission the writer, and the only place to see that is in the print edition. And that's always been my kind of philosophy. And the digital space is different. You know, you can't control things in the same way. So it's a very complicated argument, which gets to the kind of mechanics and economics of publishing at the moment. But I mean, I guess what, yeah.
I suppose the question here is because we're trying to, getting published. I wondered if, because of the whole digital setup, that actually there were more opportunities, but maybe that's not the case.
I think there are. They just they don't pay as well, but I think there are. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of the health of publishing generally, it's in a, COVID is just, as in so many ways, it kind of accelerated things that are all going on, and where we are in 6 months' time is going to be really fascinating for the whole industry. But so in terms of opportunities, yeah, there's more online opportunities. There are independent publishers, a whole wealth of kind of smaller independent magazines that are coming up, and
self-publishing. I mean, that obviously is not your thing, but I suppose people are self-publishing in a way that maybe that's a dreadful thing. I don't know, but it's an opportunity again that people could get their stuff out in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a downer, but I think with independent publishing, I remember going to a talk and getting quite angry because there were 3 independent publishers of independent magazines who were very smug about kind of how creative and interesting and cool they were, and kind of down on fuddy-duddy publishing magazines. And I'm like, well, those fuddy-duddy publishing magazines pay people, not very much, but they pay people. And the smaller independent publishers often don't, or not very much. So my worry is always about, is there still a career in magazine journalism and magazine writing, or a career that there was? But, on the optimistic sense, it's that people, still want to write, and they still want to have a voice, and they still see, the written word in the magazine article or the print or the online article as a way of getting their voice across, and increasingly different voices. So the hope is that the industry evolves and new online forms are generated, and independent magazines are generated, and bigger magazines kind of continue to move and make space for that. Wallpaper still makes money as a print magazine. There aren't that many left that do, but they do, because they still create a environment that advertisers want to be in, and that a particular group of people feels it's useful and enlightening and inspirational to pick up and read. And as long as there are magazines, not just Wallpaper, but lots of magazines that can still do that, then there's still, there's still going to be spaces for people.
So I'm going to ask that really difficult question. I'm a budding journalist. I've written a fantastic piece about Trellick Town, my local skyscraper, or whatever it is. I would like to present it to you, or I would like to, where do I go? What's the, are there like 3 key things, i.e. please don't send a letter, or, are there any key things that people can sort of take from this conversation that we're having, that they can really learn not to kind of make a kind of giant gaffe in sending it to the senior editor, or
yeah, I mean, I would never send personally, would never send an on-spec article to people. I would come up with ideas. The thing about, if you really want to write for a magazine, a particular magazine or a couple of magazines, you have to know what that magazine's world is, and the mechanics of that magazine, what sections it runs, what goes in the front, what goes in the middle, what goes in the well, what kind of design stories, what kind of architecture stories, how are those stories written, what kind of art stories, how are those work? And we have a particular way of writing art stories. We have a particular way of writing design stories. We have a particular way. So you have to get your head around that. And then also, I think, you know, a magazine like Wallpaper, and maybe Wallpaper is an extreme example of that, but it has those kind of canonical kind of touchstones, and all good magazines have them. But for Wallpaper, you know, it's kind of European and American modernist architecture. It's Swiss typography. It's Japanese fashion and architecture. It's Alvar Aalto and the Eameses, and it's Dusseldorf photography, and it's Donald Judd and Brancusi, and, you know, and all those things, all those map points generate a kind of logic. And as an editor, you slowly immerse yourselves in that, and you understand what that world is and why things fit in it and don't fit in it. That's what an editor's job is to kind of edit in and out those things. And so as much as possible, if you're trying to get into that world, you have to kind of, as much as possible, understand how it's mapping the world, mapping its world. And it's not easy. I mean, I think I was freelancing for Wallpaper for a long time before I joined the staff. And it took me 6 months probably before I fully kind of understood the way that world worked and how things worked in it, and why they were right for it and why they weren't right for it. But once you've got that, you know, then you know, you begin to be able, and then you understand its tone of voice and all those kind of things. Then you can start to kind of become contribute and be part of that. But
I think, you know, I mean, that's obviously key in that you know, you have to kind of know your world. That's like, but also you probably have to know what's been written about. I mean, you know, you really
absolutely, yeah. There's no,
don't come across, you know, don't come up with an article about Trilicta because it's been written 1,000 times before. It's like, exactly. What's new, what's the, you know, how is your tone of voice different? Or if it's too different, then that's not going to work. So I think it really is, it's doing your homework is what you're saying.
Exactly. Well, if you're a young writer, as long as, you know, you just want to get the opportunity for me or wherever commissioning editor to go, actually, this person kind of gets it, we'll try them out for something. That's all. And so you don't have to be completely on top of things. You just have to show promise as a writer and get over the sense that you understand what Wallpaper's trying to do, or whatever magazine you're trying to work, and get the chance to be given the opportunity to try something, basically. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, even if you send in ideas and they get poo-pooed, that's not really the point. The point is you've proven, you know, that you're thinking in the right kind of way.
Nick, I think that's really helpful. Now, I'm aware that we would love some questions. We've got one question here, which is actually for Taran, but we'll come back to you, Nick. And Taran, if you could, maybe after this question, have a think about also what your takeaways are for people. Now, someone is asking something very technical, so and it's quite long, so I'm going to read it as sort of as I can, and also if it's too much, because they're asking about how do you blend exposures in post. I don't think you're going to be able to answer all those questions. But I would like to be able to, I'm going to read it anyway, and you take on.
I think that's the question.
Yeah. Hi, Taran. First, I would like to thank you for inspiring us. I love your work, especially your in-house portraits of house owners, architects, and I just love your series of Japanese restaurants and tea houses. I've got a few questions on processing images. How important is post-processing? Very. Maybe not. How do you blend different exposures in post? What software can you recommend? How do you color grade? Do you have any saturation? Do you take out saturation from white walls? There are many tutorials out there, but most are no more than an online money machine. Any learning links you can recommend? I apologize for shooting all this at once. Thank you, Mikel.
Wow, that's a super loaded technical questions there.
Yeah.
I think, look,
as much as you can, because
I think post-production's really important, but for me, the most important thing is try and get as much as you can in shot. Get those lines really straight in shot. There are software tools out there like Capture One or Lightroom, which you can you can do some really good post-production on using those. Blending windows and things. I do them in Photoshop. That's basically what it's trying to say is when you're sort of facing a window, obviously when you're shooting, you're going to have different exposures from the outside and the inside, and you stack those images together, take a few images at different exposures, and then you have to put them together and process them together. And I think the best thing to do that in is in Photoshop. I really hate that word Photoshop because I hate people saying, oh yeah, we can just change that in Photoshop. Try and get it in camera. That's my go. Look, yeah. Try and get
I'm curious about saturation and white walls.
White walls and saturation. I think probably the question there is when you turn on the lights in a building, say you get this horrible tungsten light just smashing around everywhere. And what I probably would, if I cannot turn those lights off, it depends on the space. If you want that sort of industrial sort of feel to it still, then yes, I would saturate some of the yellows out of the image, and sometimes the blues as well. But yeah, I can't give all my tricks away in one go.
No, that's epic. Exactly. I think you have to go out and it's trial and error. I mean, I would imagine you just get better. It's like if you're doing it all the time, you just get better at it.
There are certain clients who have got a specific way they like things shot, like architects and McLaren Excel, for example. They really like decontrasting and desaturated images, which work really well in some circumstances, but I know for a fact that's not going to get in this publication or that publication. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm constantly learning. I sometimes have this sort of, imposter syndrome mentality where, like I've only been doing this for 2.5 years, but I really, really enjoy what I do. I learned so much from like the stylists, the clients, the PR companies, the editors. I'm constantly talking to journalists, and that makes me feel alive in what I'm doing. And yeah, I really, really enjoy this space. And I just can't believe that, 2.5 years ago, I was sat on a desk at Goldman Sachs. But yeah, nothing wrong with that. It's just
that's inspiring to everybody. I mean, I really think that's such a, it's the power of just being able to go and do it. And I've got another question for Nick, which is from, forgive me, I can see you there, I don't know how to pronounce your name. It's Micah Gebka. Is that right? Brilliant. Phew. So they said, thank you so much. She said, thank you so much. She says, I'm a young designer and she's always wondered how to contact you. And basically what she's asking is, how can I kind of draw attention to my work? I'm a young designer. I'd like to have a piece written about me. She obviously hasn't got a massive PR thing behind. Yeah. Maybe she's got interesting stuff to be featured. How does she do that?
Yeah, it's a really important point. Get to the right editor. Like we have a design editor, so in that instance probably don't come to me. It's like I was saying, I get lots of people contacting me on LinkedIn who are photographers, and it's hard, but I don't commission photography, so and I haven't got time to. So anyway, point is, call the magazine or look on the website, find the contact for the design editor, the lovely Rosa Bertoli in this instance, and then provide some visuals in the as well. So just some, like, not saying get a professional photographer, but we have to be able to see what the visual potential of what you're doing is, and then just tell us your story.
Just back to that, I would say that was critical. I think if you get a dodgy photo,
absolutely.
So the design itself could be fantastic, but if it's photographed, it's not. It's just not even going to register. So actually getting it photographed, as Taran would say, is vital, is really important.
Yeah, I think so too.
We can't commission anything unless we know there's a nice visual story there. And as I said, we fascinated by process. So tell us about your process. How do you, what are you trying to do? What materials are you working with? What are you trying to do that nobody else is doing? Who else have you worked with? We're fascinated by the design process because that's what other designers and people, most of our readers are design professionals or of some way. So we're trying to tell process stories about the decisions people make and why they make them fundamentally. So that's, you know, if you can explain that to us and engage us in that, then, you know, that's the job.
Yeah, we will always be grateful because you featured in your video bit of Wallpaper. We had a film made of the construction of some seating that is now on the peninsula, concrete seating, and we got a filmmaker to go and see the mods being made and it all being mixed up and all the concrete being, and it's quite a kind of mundane video, and yet it's also completely fascinating. We were so pleased, and I suppose that's it. It's because you don't see that all the time.
No, exactly. I mean, yeah, that's what I'm fascinated by, and what I hope readers are fascinated by is the decisions that people make as they go along and why they make them, and the challenges that they, you know, that's what interests me. And I think what interests, you know, I think it's an ugly word, but something like Wallpaper is kind of a prosumer magazine. I mean, it's such an ugly word, but unless people are getting, you know, unless they can get into this takeaway point, unless they're coming away from it going, wow, I really learned something about the process from that, then, you know, I think that's what engages people most. Not the shiny new thing. We're not, you know, it's not in the business of, you know, the shiny new bauble or the shiny new object. That's boring.
I think also, you know, for designers who want to be profiled, I think one of the, it's another takeaway as well in a way, but is looking to how to collaborate as well. And maybe it's their idea to go and find the photographer that they think that will tell their story really well, or a writer as well, and then building that. And that's what I love doing as well as a collaboration, and how I often get things published is working in collaboration. You know, I talk to different stylists, I talk to different journalists all the time, and I'm just like, you know, what is it that makes it tick? You know, how can we get images in there? I think from a designer's perspective as well, if you go and seek out those, they're not necessarily influencers, but, you know, a writer that understands or writes the way that you like, and a photographer that can, you know, visualize that.
I mean, it's that cross-disciplinary discussion which also happens in fashion, that, you know, you have a stylist you like, you have a photographer you like, you get work with a designer you like, you get, I mean, it's again, we're back to the, you know, it's about people. It's about being able to have conversations with people and reach out to people and really, work with. Now we've got 2 more questions, so I'm going to really try. We've got like 2 minutes, so we're going to have a really quick one for Taran, which is basically saying, are publishers interested in the documentation of, you know, the build? And I think we're saying yes, they are. But absolutely. Is it unusual to for people to be interested in those shots you did of DD, which are kind of mid build?
Look, I mean, they got published with Wallpaper, so yeah, there's obviously space for it, right? I think you know, PR company like Zettler, they're really good at sort of knowing what works with who as well, and, you know, and matching those up. I think there's definitely space out there for mid-construction shots to get out there, especially if it's of something of note, a project of note. I mean, of course, you know, if you're doing mid-construction shots of a kitchen extension, it's not necessarily going to get published. But like we've just done our extension, and because it's a Walter Siegel house, we know it's going to pretty well do well, and it's been out in Dezeen, and, you know, it's I don't know what it is, you know, I guess, yeah, there's definitely importance in the build environment as well, and mid-construction shots. Yeah, they've got a space in every publication.
Yeah, for us, it's just,
just because there's one more question for you, and I want to get it in because we've only got 1 more minute. So it would be interesting to hear how the pandemic has informed plans ahead of wallpaper.com. I imagine that impressions may have gone up during this time. Are you thinking of any new avenues digitally in the future, also considering how social channels have become a vehicle for discourse with the design industry? They're talking about design emergency with Alice Rawhorn, which also brings me to the question, which is last on my list, but I think also really important, is Instagram. How does that play into both of your work?
There's no way of answering that in a minute, but yeah, the pandemic's been, Okay, let me try and sum it up. I am and we are more and more interested, I think, in interrupting the design process at various stages, instead of trying to go, this is the finished thing, and using all kinds of different channels to keep telling those stories, those process stories, and the context, and that can be on different channels in different ways. And that's what we're working out: what works in print, what works on Instagram, what works on the website. Different parts of that story work in different places. To sum it up, so yeah, I mean, I think it's been a real, and you know, the design emergency is kind of a fascinating example, and that kind of ties into Wallpaper Remade, which is an exhibition we do, which is around sustainability and how we tell stories around that. So yeah, the pandemic has forced us all, because we couldn't shoot anything really, and there wasn't a lot. it was such a,
yeah,
it forced us to innovate in a lot of ways, which is still kind of percolating through. Is kind of, it's a much bigger discussion, but yeah.
I think also, you know, Instagram as a social media tool from a photographer's perspective is, I mean, look, I would say probably 90% of my commissions or new commissions through Instagram. That's it's really interesting for me because, you know, I'm quite new to it. I haven't got a massive following. I've got like 5,000. I know there's a lot of photographers who've got plenty more, but it's enough for me. I'm constantly getting new inquiries and direct messages. Taran, would love you to shoot this, would love you to shoot that. So yeah, and Instagram is a great channel for me personally, but I feel like I don't spend enough time on it, but maybe I do. I'm not sure.
But it obviously works. It's obviously a powerful tool. I think that's really what it is. Instagram a powerful tool, and yes, it is. I think that's probably key.
I don't know what Twitter's like though for you, Nick. You know,
no, I mean, we have a huge following. I don't really look at. I mean, I think we had the second biggest Twitter following of any magazine in the world at one point, or something extraordinary. Wow. It was 1.2 million or something. It was kind of second only to US Vogue. I don't know whether it's still is. Yeah, and Instagram following is now 1 million plus or something. Is it? I always forget the social figures. I should pay more attention. But yes, I mean, yeah, it's an amazing tool, and we're still working out what, yeah, like I said, what stories work best on and what format. And the video, the kind of Instagram live thing is something we haven't really explored, but we could do.
I think we've definitely got to have another discussion. I think, you know, in a month's time, we'll come back and we'll have another, because there is so much to talk about. I actually just wanted to thank Nicholas Cooney, and I'm not going to be able to say this name, Taran Wilkhu, for asking those questions.
Darine, that's Darine, by the way.
Oh,
she was actually our first guest on the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's not my forte, I have to say.
No.
But we really, really appreciate questions, because it's what makes Zoom, you know, that you can actually
great question.
interact. So that's fantastic. Really, really good questions. So thank you for those. We'd just like to say thank you for coming on this cold day. I want to say thank you, Nick, just for giving us a little peek into your world, because, you know, we actually don't get to know about that very often, and I've certainly been to a lot. And I just wanted to see your photos, basically. You know, it's just been a total treat to have your photographs to look at and to talk to you about how you got to where you are, which is pretty amazing, really. It's really inspiring. So we really appreciate it, coming on and being on our lunchtime Friday Zoom, which certainly makes me feel more alive and more part of a community. So thank you so much, and thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a very happy weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.